Now it's my pleasure to turn things over to Julie Smitherman, Water Efficiency and Customer Service Manager at Medford Water, and Cody Scoggins, Water Efficiency Coordinator at Medford Water. So I'm going to stop sharing and Julie's going to start sharing and we'll move right along.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Let's get that shared. Everyone see the presentation?
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. All right, so thank you, Joe, for that introduction. And today, like he said, we're going to go over some of the ways we use water, the different sources in the valley, and then ways we can be more efficient with those sources. So we'll just dive in here because we've got a good 40-minute program here. So here we go. Okay, so Joe just went over this, but ways we use water, particularly here in Southern Oregon. Now, we have a lot of agriculture in our area, livestock, many small farms, orchards, vineyards, and so much more that we've seen in the last couple of years. We also have rural domestic use, being groundwater, which is not always reliable, given the geology in our area. We have municipal supplies, so drinking water and wastewater treatment. Water for recreation, tourism, going skiing, fishing, boating, swimming. We all enjoy doing those things, but if we don't have water, then it makes it very difficult to do those things. And then in stream, we need water for the fish, for the riparian areas. We're very well known for our lakes and rivers and forests in this area. And then there's also other uses of water, hydro. In fact, Ashland has hydroelectric, and about 5% of their energy is produced by hydroelectric. Industrial, and also we need water for wildlife. So how do we make sure that everyone has the water that they need? We will talk a little bit about water rights. Now, the Oregon Water Resources Department manages the waters of the state. And so water rights in Oregon, the way it works is the first in time is the first in right. So that's called a priority date. And that determines who can use the available water. And so if there is a shortage, then the person or the entity that has the oldest water right gets to take that water first. And now the water must be used for a beneficial purpose without waste. And now that term beneficial use has come under scrutiny in the last couple of years. But also the water right stays with the land. The governor can declare a drought emergency for the area. And this drought declaration can prioritize human use and stock watering regardless of priority date. It also lessens permit times, application time. So really it's definitely makes it easier so that you can get resources. Wells, we have a lot of wells in our area, mostly small agricultural and rural homes. And there's a couple different water rights that you can have. You can have a domestic water right, which is just for your home and about half an acre around your home, or you can have an irrigation water right to water larger than a half an acre. Groundwater in our area is not always reliable for large scale. There is some over appropriation and there are some areas of that are considered critical groundwater areas. So areas that are decreasing. We have some weather and water trends here. We'll just go through this. Typically, we receive about 18 inches of water per year. The past few years, we've been well below normal. We get little summer precipitation, as Joe was talking about, and we rely heavily on our snowpack for our water resources to get us through the summer months. It's kind of like a bank account. We save it naturally up in the mountains until we need it, and it acts as a natural storage, typically. But we've had more frequent drought, we've had heavier rains, less snowpack, warmer temperatures, we've had earlier snow melts in the season. That then gives us drier soils, we have higher evapotranspiration, we've even experienced some longer summers. So it seems like the summer just keeps going and going, and that has become more of a trend in the recent decade. And then that increases the need and the use of water. And so we've had compounding years of low precipitation and snow. And unfortunately, that's going to take a few years to recover from. It has been nice to see the precipitation, everything we've been getting recently, and it's put us in a much better position. However, it's still going to take time, especially for some of the irrigation district reservoirs to get back to where they were before. Those pictures really show what we see in a normal May, and I put quotations because what is normal? Normal May, and that is a picture of May 2015. Everyone might remember what we experienced back in 14 and 15. We were not that bad this year, not as bad as far as snowpack goes. However, we didn't get as much as we needed in January, February, and March. So let's look at the Oregon Drought Monitor. This was in 2021, so towards the end of the year, 2021. And now this goes into February 2022. You can see how much the drought has expanded across the state, and in particular, that real dark, exceptional drought area in Central Oregon really expanded. And then this is the most recent. The area in Jackson County, as you can see, is now more in extreme drought. Even given the precipitation and snowpack we have received, it's still, our area has been so dry for so long that it is still considered in extreme drought. Now, this is what I call a tale of two winters, because this really was, we started out so well, you know, November through October through December, and we had a snowpack was 187% of normal in early January. So we were all excited, you know, we thought this was going to be a great year. And then it started to go down a little bit. And about early March, we saw about 75, and we're going, okay. And then April hit, and we went down even further. So what we saw in the news during this time, starting early March, we saw a lot of things in the news. Epic drought. This year, Governor Brown declared a drought emergency for Jackson County on April 7th. A season snowpack stacks up short. Medford surpassed a 1913 record for driest February on record. So this is the type of conditions that we've seen in the last couple of years. And the West in particular is under this mega drought, and areas in California, Arizona have definitely seen a big increase in drought periods throughout the last decade. Then this is the good news. So I was real excited by this. So the spring storm has hit our region and has brought a significant amount of precipitation. And the Chinook catch a break. I loved that headline. Recent rains have really shot the Rogue Basin's water production up just recently. Big jump in snow depth at Crater Lake. So in about the beginning, second or third week of April, we really started to get a break from what we had been having in January, February, and March. And snowpack went up. This is snow water equivalent, so the amount of water that's held within that snowpack. And this was as of April 21st. Now, at the beginning of April, this was closer to about 60% of normal. So in the Rogue Umpqua area, you see there, that's showing our area and how much snow water equivalent we have. So as of April 21st, it went up to 83. And then most recently, this is what it looks like. And I tell you what, I love these colors, these bright blues and greens. Makes me very happy to see this. And so what we're showing here is that right now, the snowpack is about 113% of normal in the Rogue Umpqua Basin. So we really came out of what we were experiencing in January, February, and March. And so right now we're looking a bit more normal as far as snowpack goes for this time of year. Now I'll jump into talking about our water resources. This gives a good overview, and I love this map showing the Rogue River Basin. And we're going to focus on the northeastern side of the Rogue River Basin. And it's going to look more like this. It's broken down into the upper Rogue and the middle Rogue. And we're going to focus on those two areas, upper and middle Rogue. So the first, so if I go back here, you see the upper Rogue. So that is right where the Rogue River Watershed and Big Butte Springs watershed lies. And you can see all the way up there by Crater Lake is where the beginning of the Rogue River starts, up there by Boundary Springs. And we have Big Butte Springs there. It comes right off of the Cascades, right at the base of Mount McLaughlin. And the water supply, the water that comes out of Big Butte Springs and the Rogue River provides water to approximately 140,000 people across this valley. That includes Medford and White City, And then our partner cities who we sell water to, they all have their water rights. Every city has a water right. But the city of Medford, or Medford Water Commissions, provides the water, treats the water, distributes the water to those communities. And those communities are Central Point, Eagle Point, Jacksonville, Phoenix, Talent, and sometimes Ashland. So we'll talk about the first source, which is Big Butte Springs. It's the primary source of water for the Medford area, and there's 140,000 people. And it's been the water source since 1927. It's just located just outside of Butte Falls. It's a pristine source, so it requires very minimal treatment and pumping. If you ever get a chance to do a tour out there, there is a water fountain, a drinking fountain that you can drink directly from, or get a cup and fill up, and it has no treatment, came right out of the spring. It's just pure spring water. And this system is piped, so water never sees daylight, the springs water, until it comes out through your tap. And so those two pipes, it flows by gravity for about 30 miles, and this supplies us with water all year long. The aquifer that we have, it depends on rain and snowpack. And so any type of precipitation is very helpful to the Springs area. But the springs have decreased over the past decade by over 20% in the past decade, unfortunately. And given the droughts that we've been dealing with the past few years, that's a good indication of why that is. The area up there is about 2,700 feet. It's volcanic rock. It's got a good aquifer, so it can hold a lot of water. Anything that comes down off of Mount McLaughlin is held there in that aquifer. Now, the pipes can bring to town 26 million gallons per day, but because the springs have decreased in flows, currently we're only able to bring about 19 million gallons of water per day. Now, so then we start at about May or so, because water use and water demand in our community starts to increase, and that's due to irrigation and all of our summer activities. So it was determined that in 1968, we needed a secondary source to keep up with that demand. And it's surface water. It does require treatment, but it is a little bit warmer. So sometimes you might notice a difference in water, but it's only because it's slightly warmer than the springs water. The capacity of our treatment plant is 45 million gallons per day. So right now, that's the most that plant could ever produce. It is going through an expansion right now, but as of right now, that's the most you can get out of that plant, and that's about equivalent to 70 CFS. So to put it into perspective, summer flows, river flows are between 1,500, 2,500 CFS. And right now, currently, the flows are at 2,200. So when you think about it, I have a lot of people say, oh, we must take all the water out of the Rogue River. This really just puts it into perspective about how much water we are actually pulling out of the Rogue. Now, when I talked about how the springs were lower, the Duff plant has to make up the difference for that. And so historically, we've operated May through October, but because demand has increased, because our summers have been extended in the past, we're now running the plant between April and November, and eventually we may have to run it all year long. And I'd like to direct you to a great website that I found. It's called snowflow.org. Lots of great information on river flows, and it is USGS information. So here's a couple graphs showing you the statistics of water use for Medford and surrounding communities. So the total from both sources, we have the ability to use we have capacity for 62 million gallons per day. In 2021, if you look at that graph down there, we had record production at the plant. And if you all remember, in June last year, we had a nice little heat wave. And that's what created that increase really early in the season. Plus, we had reduced supply from the springs. And so you see the difference between the lines on 2020 and 2021. That's really just showing that because of the decrease we had in the springs flows, the Duff treatment plant had to produce that much more water to supply the community with the water that we needed. Our average day demand, and again, when I'm talking about all of these statistics, this includes all of those communities that I mentioned in the beginning. So average winter daily demand, 17 million gallons. So all the way through the winter, we can just use the springs water and we don't have to supplement. And that covers everyone in this community that gets municipal water. And our average summer day demand is 47 million gallons per day. But we did hit a peak, and we were pushing 62 MGD in 2020 when we had the Almeida fire. And that's when we had to ask everyone to cut back as much as they could, an emergency situation, because we could not keep up with demand. And so any other uses that weren't necessary, we asked people to stop using water where they could. Peak day is normally early July or August, but again, last year it was June. Hopefully that's not going to be the case this year, looking at the extended forecast. And then there's another graph showing Big Butte Springs and the Duff water treatment plants. You really get an idea of how much water we use from the springs each year and how much we use from the Rogue River. And like I said, that balance may be changing as springs flows continue to decrease. Okay, so this is showing the flows from Big Butte Springs. And that dotted line on the bottom shows the lowest stream flows that we've ever had. But it started to creep back up from this last month, April through May. All the precipitation and the snow that we received has really helped increase the flows. And you can see here, minimum flow for 2 full pipes. Right now, we're only at 1.5 pipes because that's all we can bring down. Once we get up past that red line, we can actually bring in more water. And so that's what we're shooting for. That's what we're hoping for. But we did get above average April precipitation, so that helped us. And Lost Creek Lake. So that is actually where the water, we have water rights. That's where it's stored, is in Lost Creek Lake. And early April, it wasn't looking too good. It was only 51% full. But luckily, we've had, now we're at 97% full. And in fact, I looked at it just recently today and it said 98. So we're still climbing, which is excellent news. So now I'm going to jump into Ashland Creek Watershed, and I want to talk about the sources of water for the city of Ashland. Now, Ashland, different from Big Butte Springs and Rogue River, Ashland's water comes from Siskiyou Mountains. And the watershed, as you can see, it's outlined there on the right, the highest peak being Mount Ashland. And it all flows down into what you see there, Reeder Reservoir. Now, if you look at the difference in size between Reeder Reservoir on the left and Immigrant Lake over there on the right, it is a much smaller reservoir. So it does fill up typically every year. And we really depend on that snowpack as our summer storage, get us through the year. We have limited aquifer storage, so different geology than is in the Cascades. It's more fractured in Ashland, and so it's very hard to estimate how much water is actually being held because it's a different geology and it's not like the aquifer in the Cascades for Big Butte Springs. Now, this water is supposed to supply 21,000 people. And the Ashland Creek East and West Forks is what flows into Reeder Reservoir. So we really rely on the flows from those creeks coming down off of Mount Ashland and this side of Wagner Butte to fill that Reeder Reservoir. And some stats, winter usage is usually 1.5 to 2 million gallons per day, but we jump 3-4 times in the summer because of irrigation and our summer uses to 5.5 and all the way up to 6 million gallons per day. Now, Ashland in June of last year had their peak day in June, which was 6 million gallons, which is quite a lot in the beginning of the season. So Ashland has 3 water sources. The first, and I don't know if everyone's seen what Reeder Reservoir looks like on the left, but that is it. That's Reeder Reservoir, and that's Hostler Dam. And so we have that impoundment, and that is the primary source for the city of Ashland. The secondary source is TID water, water from the Talent Irrigation District. And that comes to us via canal through the city of Ashland, and I'll get into more details in just a minute. And then this third source, Ashland does have a water right from Lost Creek Lake, And so that water is transported via Medford Water Commission through the tap line. It's called the Talent Ashland Phoenix Intertie. And that supplies their third source of water, or emergency source. So the primary source, again, Reeder Reservoir is smaller, but it does hold 280 million gallons. And I know that might sound like a lot, but in the summertime, we can go through that pretty fast. It will fill. Usually it fills every spring. I don't think I've seen it not fill in the spring. And East and West Forks that flow into Reeder Reservoir can be close to 2 million gallons per day towards the end of the summer, and all the way up to 20 million gallons per day in the beginning when the snow is melting. Currently, the reservoir is at 93%, and it is continuing to fill. The demand for the community is at 2.9 million gallons per day, and the water that's flowing in from the East and West Forks is about 8.65 million gallons per day. Now, I forgot to mention what the production is for Medford and all the surrounding cities right now, and we're about 27 million gallons right now. So we have started up the Duff treatment plant, and we are pulling water from Rogue River. So let's talk about Talent Irrigation District for just a second. This is a canal. It's you may have seen it in Ashland. It runs along the hillside. It's parallel to the city. It is used for irrigation. It's the primary use of irrigation for specific landscapes. Some people have a water right through TID. Others in Ashland pay the city of Ashland because the city of Ashland has the water right. And you see down here, water right is 446 million gallons, and that equates to roughly 2 million gallons per day. The source of this water actually comes from Howard Prairie and Hyatt Lake, and not Immigrant. It bypasses Immigrant. It is if we have to. So if Reeder Reservoir is not enough, if we don't have the inflows coming into the reservoir, filling it up, we have to start using Talent irrigation water for drinking water. So if we can't keep up with the demand, if the supply is not keeping up with the demand, then we'll start pumping TID water to the treatment plant, and we treat it for drinking water standards. Now, this water source is typically only available May through September, but as a lot of you know, the last 2 years, TID has not been available for drinking water. It is still going to be available for irrigation purposes, irrigation of landscapes, but as we've heard, it may not take us through the whole season. But unfortunately, as we're talking about municipal water here, the city of Ashland is more than likely not going to be able to utilize any of the TID water for drinking. And again, this water source not connected to Immigrant Lake. So again, Talent Ashland Phoenix Intertie is the third supply, and it's considered the emergency water supply, although it's become more used in the last couple of years because we haven't had the TID water to use. And so as soon as our demand starts outpacing our supply from Reeder Reservoir, instead of going to TID, we're now going to tap. And we haven't had this very long. It finally got constructed in 2014, and we've only had to use it a couple times before that. We have a water right, and that is held in Lost Creek Lake, 325 million gallons. And again, that equates to about 2 million gallons per day in the summer. It's available year round if we needed it, but we have that 325 million gallons to distribute through the year. It is fully treated water because it comes through Duff treatment plant and is treated to drinking water standards, and then it's piped all the way through the valley, all the way to Ashland. And again, like I said, we'll likely use this year as our demand outpaces our supply. So here's a good picture of where all of these things live. You see Reeder Reservoir way up there, upper right corner. Over here on the left, you see Howard Prairie, Hyatt Lake. You see how that little dotted canal there, it says TID canal. It doesn't go through Immigrant Lake. It bypasses it completely and comes into town. And then from where it says it links with Croson Reservoir, we never put it directly into a reservoir. It is pumped up to the treatment plant and treated there and then distributed into the system. And then you can see all the tank reservoirs that exist throughout the community as well for storage. And then you've got the tap line coming in, and that water gets directed to the Granite Reservoir, which I'm sure you've all seen there up in the park, in Lithia Park. Really real old tank up there. It's got nice moss growing on it. But that is one of the older tanks in Ashland. And now I want to point out that we now we have a water supply page, and we're going to be updating that with any news. So if you want to check out what's going on with the water supply, go to that link there that's listed. Lots of great information on our current supply. There is the PowerPoint that was just presented to council on May 2nd, all about this year's supply and the process that it'll be taken. And then the council communication is on there too. So Public Works Director gave a great presentation to the council about this year and the water supply. The goal is to stay within about 4.5 million gallons this year. So you heard me say earlier that we have peak at 6 million gallons per day. We want to try to keep that down to 4.5 million gallons per day. So how would anyone know what amount we're at? We have actually in the city of Ashland, and I say we because I think of myself still being in Ashland and working with Ashland, but we have a water dashboard that has been created. So if you haven't seen that, this is what it looks like. And it's pretty cool stuff. It will show you up at the top, that is how full Reeder Reservoir is. And you can see that red line there. That's called the drawdown curve. And what that is showing is it's a good indicator. So when that graph starts to go below that red line, that means that we have to enter into we have to either do restrictions on water use or we start pumping tap. And so first we'll start pumping tap. As soon as that draws down below that red line, we will pump tap. And then if necessary, we will talk about voluntary water conservation and curtailment and go from there. But you can see there's a lot of really good stats here. This shows the plant production, and it's actually going to show up. I believe they're going to put it in red, yellow, and green to just show where we're at. And like I said, right now we're about 2.9 million gallons per day, and we want to stay right in that 4.5 million gallons per day. So I encourage you to check this out. This is a great dashboard, and it should be updated daily. Now, we talked about how snowpack wasn't so great. It started out great, but then it melted off quite a bit. So when I originally gave part of this presentation in the beginning of March, this year's snowpack was at 140. And so since the beginning of March to now, we've increased inches up on Mount Ashland to 180. And I just love this graph. I pulled this from Mount Ashland's website. It really gives you a good idea of what the snowpack has been up there throughout the years. And it breaks it down between El Nino years and La Nina years. And we all talk about, oh, this must be the lowest snowpack we've ever gotten. Well, it's not. We've actually had years in the past, like 2015, where we got only 87 inches, or back in 1991, 71 inches. So it definitely is cycling, but the trends are showing less snowpack over time. And then this is a great graph, and the link there at the bottom, I know it's long, but if you need a copy of this information, I'm happy to send it to you. At the beginning of this year, this is specific for Ashland, the snow water equivalent, or the percent of median, was only 40%. We were only 40% of median in early April. Then it started going back up, but by early May, when the presentation was given to council, we were at 62%. And now currently we're at 78% of normal. So we really have done a lot better than we initially thought we were going to do this year. And you can see that the black line, it represents 2022 snowpack or snow water equivalent, excuse me. And the green line represents the median. And so you can see how much it's fluctuated over the years. 2015 was that red line down at the bottom. And so if you have a chance to get on the website and look at this graph, you can click other years and it will show you where that lines up on this graph. Okay, so almost finished with my section. I'm going to talk quickly about irrigation districts because they have a whole nother source of supply. The irrigation districts, the lakes, the reservoirs that were created for irrigation in our area were completed in the early 1900s to 1950s. And these districts and these reservoirs, they provide water to approximately 40,000 acres of land. And then another 170 acres of land get water from other streams, tributaries, and groundwater. Now, the irrigation districts are really struggling, and I think they're the ones who've been hit the hardest by these drought years. They had years of low precipitation, snow accumulation. Those reservoirs just kept getting drawn down farther and farther, and it just makes it that much harder to refill them each year, especially when we're having minimal years of snowpack and precipitation. In 2021, there was late startups and water rotations and shutdowns as early as mid-July for TID and early August for MID. It's the shortest season, I think, on record. And it was looking to be the worst this year until we got some of this precipitation. But last year, again, some crop yields were reduced. They weren't planted. The quality was poor, and there was a lot of tree mortality in the area. So this is not what the lakes look like right now. But this is all the lakes. These are the irrigation district lakes. So when we think about where our water comes from, we need to be careful not to confuse where our drinking water comes from and where our irrigation water comes from. And that's what we're seeing here on this slide. These are the lakes that provide irrigation water to all the agriculture in our area. And this is what they look like when they're full. This is what we want them to look like. This gives a kind of more of a map, a general geographic location of where these lakes exist. And you can see it's color coded there. So you've got Willow Lake is the water source for Eagle Point Irrigation District. Fish Lake, 4 Mile Lakes for MID. Agate Lake is for the Rogue River Valley Irrigation District. And then you had Howard Prairie, Hyatt Lake, and Immigrant Lake are the sources of water for the Talent Irrigation District. And so those sources of water have definitely taken the brunt of these drought years. And as you've heard in the news, and this is mainly what we're hearing in the news, is that these sources of water have not been able to refill like they normally would. So just giving you an example, this is what we call the teacup diagrams. And last year, early May, this was the percentage full of each of these reservoirs. So again, not what you want to see going into a summer for irrigation season. And as you know, we shut down, the irrigation district shut down very early. This is what it looked like as of January. So we were very, very nervous starting January. I mean, this is virtually, you could walk across the lake beds at this point. 227, 22. Started to increase just a little bit, still not seeing what we want. And then just most recently, when I pulled this on 516, you see Immigrants up to 25% full, Hyatt 21. You see Willow Lake has filled up completely. And the reason for that is actually Willow Lake, the source of water for Willow Lake comes from the Big Butte Springs. And so it's a good source of water. And so that's why they've managed to fill that up. I took this quote from TID as of 518. It said, as of today, the water supply is aligning more closely to what we had this time last year. We currently have approximately 35 days of water in storage. So again, not looking good, not looking as bad as it could have been as of April 1st, but not where we want to be, so that we can expect that there's going to be some cutbacks again this year.